Zara Novak hit the ground hard as Landon Pierce's full weight crashed into her from behind. Her green jacket tore as she skidded across the grocery store's cold tile floor, her phone spinning away into a display of canned goods. The impact knocked the breath from her lungs, but her FBI training kicked in immediately. Landon pinned her down with his knee pressed into her spine, his voice screaming over her head. "Stop resisting. You're under citizen's arrest for shoplifting." Before we dive deeper into this shocking assault, this is Chains Broken, where we honor those who refuse to be silenced. If you believe courage deserves to be remembered, subscribe now and carry their legacy forward. Zara's hands were scraped and bleeding from the fall, but she remained motionless, knowing that any defensive move she made would be twisted into evidence against her. Around them, shocked customers backed away as if witnessing a real crime, while security cameras captured every second of a store manager assaulting a federal agent who had been investigating his criminal network. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows across the scene of injustice unfolding in broad daylight. Zara could feel the cold tile pressing against her cheek as Landon's weight crushed down on her. Her training had prepared her for dangerous situations, but not for being helpless while maintaining her cover. "You people think you can just walk into my store and steal whatever you want." Landon's spit hit the back of her neck as he pressed his knee deeper into her spine. The racist venom in his voice carried across the store, making several customers gasp in horror. Freya Wilson, a regular customer shopping with her teenage daughter, pulled out her phone and started recording. Her hands trembled as she captured the brutal assault, knowing she was witnessing something that would change lives forever. "Mom, shouldn't we help her?" Freya's daughter whispered, her voice shaking with fear and confusion. "We are helping her," Freya replied firmly, keeping her camera steady. "We're making sure the truth gets told." Other customers began pulling out their phones, creating a circle of witnesses around the assault. The afternoon shopping trip had transformed into a scene of racial violence that would soon reach millions of viewers across social media platforms. Zara forced herself to remain calm, even as pain shot through her shoulder blade, where Landon's knee was grinding against bone. She had spent 3 months building this investigation, and she wouldn't let his racist brutality destroy months of careful work. Her bleeding hands pressed against the cold floor, each scrape a reminder that justice sometimes required personal sacrifice. "I haven't stolen anything," Zara said clearly, her voice carrying enough for the cameras to pick up. "You're assaulting an innocent customer." Landon laughed, a cruel sound that echoed off the store's walls. "Innocent? I've been watching you on our security system. You've been concealing merchandise, switching price tags, running the same credit card scams your people always run." The racist assumptions poured out of him like poison, each word captured by multiple phones and security cameras. Zara realized that Landon's paranoia and racism were about to expose the very criminal network she had been hunting. His desperation to prove she was a criminal would soon reveal that he was the real criminal in this store. As Landon's knee pressed harder into her spine, Zara caught sight of her scattered phone near a display of soup cans. The screen was cracked, but she could see missed calls from Agent Kai Patel, her FBI partner, who was monitoring the operation from the surveillance van outside. Kai would be watching the security feeds, documenting everything, preparing to move in if Landon's assault escalated to life-threatening violence. But for now, Zara had to endure the pain, the humiliation, and the racist abuse while maintaining her cover as an innocent customer, being brutalized by a power-hungry store manager who had no idea he was destroying his own life with every word he screamed. 3 months earlier, FBI Special Agent Zara Novak sat in the sterile conference room at the Denver field office, studying the data streams flowing across multiple monitors. Credit card fraud cases had been piling up across 6 states, all following the same disturbing pattern. Small-town grocery stores, elderly victims, and stolen financial information that disappeared into international money laundering networks. "The sophistication level doesn't match the locations," Zara explained to her supervisor, pointing to the digital forensics display. These aren't random skimming devices. Someone's running a coordinated operation using grocery stores as fronts for massive data theft. Agent Kai Patel leaned forward in his chair, examining the financial transaction logs. Look at these purchase patterns. Normal grocery transactions mixed with these microcharges that victims never notice until months later. The evidence painted a picture of criminal genius hiding behind suburban normalcy. Whoever was running this operation understood both technology and psychology, using people's trust in neighborhood businesses to steal their financial lives. Zara's expertise in cybercrime had earned her a reputation for unraveling complex digital conspiracies. She could trace data streams through multiple layers of encryption, follow money trails across international banking systems, and identify the human vulnerabilities that criminals exploited. But this case was different. The technical sophistication was paired with old-fashioned racism and local corruption that made her investigation deeply personal. The victims fit a profile, Kai observed, scrolling through the demographic data. African American customers, elderly residents, single mothers, people who typically face discrimination when they report financial crimes. Zara nodded grimly. They're targeting people who the system usually ignores. Banking officials dismiss their complaints, local police don't investigate, and by the time anyone takes them seriously, the criminals have moved on to new victims. The pattern was as disturbing as it was brilliant. Criminals were weaponizing systemic racism to protect their operation, knowing that marginalized voices would be silenced by the same institutions that should protect them. Riverside Grocery appears in 17 different fraud reports. Zara continued, highlighting the store's location on the digital map. Always the same manager listed, Landon Pierce. But here's what's interesting. The technical infrastructure suggests someone with serious cybersecurity knowledge is running the operation. Kai pulled up Pierce's background file. Store manager for 3 years, no formal technical training, but his credit reports show unexplained wealth, new car, mortgage paid off early, spending patterns that don't match a grocery store salary. He's not the mastermind, Zara concluded. He's the front man. Someone else is providing the technical expertise and taking most of the profits. Pierce gets enough money to feel important while doing the dangerous work of interfacing with customers. The investigation strategy became clear. Zara would go undercover as a customer, document the fraud operation from the inside, and identify the technical specialists behind the scenes. But she would have to be careful. Pierce's psychological profile suggested someone with deep-seated racial prejudices and a tendency toward violence when threatened. The undercover work could be dangerous, Kai warned. Pierce has 2 assault charges from previous jobs, both against people of color. If he suspects you're investigating him, then we make sure he doesn't suspect. Zara replied with determination, I'll be the perfect target. Young black woman, appears vulnerable, uses credit cards frequently. Everything his profile says he'll victimize. As Zara prepared for the undercover assignment, she studied Pierce's patterns, his store's security systems, and the technical methods being used to steal customer data. She would spend weeks establishing herself as a regular customer, documenting the criminal operation while appearing completely innocent. What she didn't expect was that Pierce's racism would explode into physical violence, transforming a careful investigation into a public assault that would expose not just his criminal network, but the broader system of prejudice that protected criminals like him. The surveillance equipment was installed, backup teams were positioned, and Zara's cover identity was established. In 72 hours, she would walk into Riverside Grocery for the first time, beginning an investigation that would uncover millions of dollars in fraud and reveal the dangerous intersection of racism and cybercrime in small-town America. Agent Kai Patel's fingers moved rapidly across the keyboard in the FBI surveillance van parked 2 blocks from Riverside Grocery. Multiple screens displayed real-time data streams, financial transaction logs, and intercepted communications that revealed the true scope of the criminal operation Zara was risking her life to expose. Target confirmed, Kai spoke into his headset to the FBI Cyber Division headquarters in Denver. Pierce is definitely the point man, but the technical infrastructure is way beyond his capabilities. The van's sophisticated monitoring equipment had been tracking digital signatures for weeks, identifying the sophisticated malware embedded in the store's payment systems. Every credit card transaction was being harvested by military-grade encryption software that required extensive cybersecurity knowledge to implement. Dr. Isabella Cruz, the FBI's leading cybercrime expert, appeared on the encrypted video conference screen. Her analysis of the stolen data patterns had identified a criminal network spanning far beyond small-town grocery stores. The payment card skimmers are connected to an international money laundering operation, Dr. Cruz explained, sharing her screen with financial flowcharts. We're tracking funds movement through shell companies in Romania, cryptocurrency exchanges in Eastern Europe, and ultimately into organized crime networks. Kai studied the data flowing across his monitors. So Pierce thinks he's running a local scam, but he's actually feeding data to international criminals. Exactly. Someone recruited him as a local asset, probably promised him easy money for installing equipment and targeting specific customers. He has no idea his grocery store is a front for a multi-million-dollar international fraud ring. The sophistication was staggering. Legitimate grocery transactions provided cover for massive data theft operations. Customer payment information was harvested in real time, duplicated and sold to criminal networks across multiple continents. The stolen financial data funded everything from human trafficking to terrorist financing. Look at this pattern. Kai highlighted a section of transaction data. They're specifically targeting customers from minority communities. The psychological profile suggests Pierce was chosen specifically because of his racist attitudes. Dr. Cruz nodded grimly. Racist store managers make perfect assets. They'll target minority customers without questioning why. And if victims complain about financial fraud, existing prejudices in the banking system mean their reports get dismissed or ignored. The criminal genius was disturbing in its simplicity. By exploiting systemic racism, international criminals had created a nearly perfect fraud operation. Minority victims face skepticism when reporting financial crimes. Local police lacked the resources to investigate complex cybercrime, and federal agencies only got involved when the damage was already done. Zara's been documenting Pierce's selection process. Kai continued, reviewing the undercover footage from previous shopping trips. He specifically targets black customers, elderly shoppers, and single mothers. Anyone who fits the profile of victims that the system typically ignores. On his monitor, Kai watched archived security footage of Pierce following Zara through the store during her previous visits. The store manager's paranoia and racial profiling had made him the perfect unwitting accomplice for international criminals who needed local assets to harvest financial data. The technical specs suggest Russian cybercriminal involvement, Dr. Cruz added, analyzing the malware signatures. The same encryption methods we've seen in other Eastern European fraud operations, but the local recruitment and targeting strategies are distinctly American. Kai's radio crackled with urgent communication from Detective Liam Ortiz, the local police liaison monitoring the situation from outside the grocery store. We've got a problem. Pierce just tackled your agent. Multiple customers are filming. This is about to go public. The surveillance van erupted into coordinated activity. Months of careful investigation were about to be exposed by Pierce's violent racism. But Kai realized that might not be entirely bad. The assault would provide probable cause for immediate arrests and could expose the entire criminal network. Dr. Cruz, how quickly can we trace the financial networks once we seize Pierce's systems? Give me 12 hours with his computers and I can map the entire international operation. The assault just gave us legal justification to execute search warrants. We've been waiting months to serve. The crowd of customers surrounding the assault scene grew larger as Landon Pierce's accusations became more frantic and racist. With his knees still pressed into Zara's spine, he pulled out his radio to call for backup, unaware that every word was being recorded by multiple phones and FBI surveillance equipment. "This is Manager Pierce at Riverside Grocery. I need police units immediately. I've apprehended a black female suspect for shoplifting, credit card fraud, and resisting arrest. She's dangerous and needs to be restrained." Zara remained motionless beneath Pierce's weight, her FBI training allowing her to endure the physical pain while mentally documenting every crime he was committing. False imprisonment, assault, filing a false police report, and civil rights violations were piling up with each passing second. Freya Wilson continued recording from her position near the produce section, her camera capturing Pierce's increasingly unhinged behavior. "You can see the store manager has tackled this innocent woman to the ground," she narrated quietly for her video. "She hasn't resisted, hasn't fought back, and I didn't see her steal anything." Other customers began sharing their own perspectives, creating multiple video records of the assault from different angles. The grocery store had become an impromptu film set documenting racial violence in real time. "I've been watching her for weeks," Pierce continued his radio transmission, his voice carrying across the store. "These people always come in groups, create distractions, steal merchandise. She's probably got stolen credit cards, drugs, weapons, everything these criminals usually carry." The racist assumptions poured out of Pierce, like a rehearsed speech, revealing the depth of his prejudice and paranoia. Every stereotype, every false accusation was being captured on video and transmitted to FBI surveillance teams outside. An elderly customer named Robert Hayes approached the scene, his face flushed with anger at what he was witnessing. "Son, you need to let that woman up right now. I've been shopping here for 20 years, and I've never seen anything like this disgraceful behavior." Pierce looked up from his position, pinning Zara to the floor, his face twisted with defensive rage. "Sir, please step back. This suspect is dangerous. I have the authority to detain shoplifters and criminals." "Authority?" Robert's voice rose with indignation. "You don't have the authority to brutalize paying customers. I saw this young lady shopping normally, minding her own business, until you attacked her like some kind of animal." More customers began speaking up, their voices creating a chorus of opposition to Pierce's actions. The community was rejecting his racist narrative in real time, providing witness testimony that would later prove crucial in federal court. Zara spoke clearly, ensuring her words carried to all the recording devices surrounding her. "I haven't stolen anything. I was shopping for groceries when this man attacked me without warning. I need medical attention for my injuries." Pierce pressed his knee harder into her spine, causing Zara to wince with pain. "Stop lying. I have video evidence of your criminal activity. Our security system caught everything." "Then show us the video," Freya Wilson called out, her phone still recording. "If you have evidence, let everyone see it." Pierce's silence revealed the emptiness of his accusations. There was no video evidence because there was no crime. His entire justification for the assault was based on racial profiling and paranoid assumptions about black customers. Detective Liam Ortiz's voice crackled over the police radio, responding to Pierce's call for backup. "Units responding to Riverside Grocery. Be advised this may involve federal jurisdiction. Proceed with caution and document everything." The local police response was about to complicate an already explosive situation. Pierce believed law enforcement would automatically support his version of events. But he had no idea that federal agents were monitoring every word, preparing to expose his criminal operation. Zara's cracked phone, still visible near the soup can display, buzzed with incoming calls from Agent Kai Patel. The FBI surveillance team was coordinating with local police, ensuring that Pierce's assault wouldn't derail months of careful investigation. As sirens approached in the distance, Pierce smiled with satisfaction, believing that police backup would validate his racist assumptions and cover up his crimes. He had no idea that the cavalry rushing to his aid would soon become the agents of his destruction. The wail of police sirens grew louder as two patrol cars pulled into the Riverside Grocery parking lot, their red and blue lights reflecting off the store's windows. Detective Liam Ortiz stepped out of the lead vehicle, his hand resting on his radio, as he surveyed the crowd of customers gathered around the store's entrance. Dispatch. This is Detective Ortiz, arriving at Riverside Grocery. Large crowd present multiple civilians with cameras requesting additional units in EMS for potential injuries. Inside the store, Landon Pierce heard the approaching sirens and smiled with vicious satisfaction. He still had Zara pinned to the cold tile floor, his knee grinding against her spine, while customers continued recording the assault from multiple angles. "You hear that?" Pierce whispered into Zara's ear, his breath hot with coffee and hatred. "That's the sound of justice coming for criminals like you. When the police get here, you're going to federal prison for credit card fraud." The irony was so complete that Zara almost smiled, despite the pain shooting through her shoulder blade. Pierce was threatening her with federal prison while committing federal crimes against a federal agent investigating his federal crimes. Two uniformed officers entered the store, their hands instinctively moving toward their weapons as they assessed the scene. Officer Maria Santos, a 10-year veteran, immediately noticed the racial dynamics and the crowd of witnesses, recording everything. "Sir, I need you to step back from the individual on the ground," Officer Santos commanded, her voice carrying the authority of someone trained to de-escalate volatile situations. Pierce looked up with surprise and indignation. "Officers, thank God you're here. I'm the store manager, and I've detained a shoplifter who was using stolen credit cards. She became violent when I tried to stop her." Officer Santos approached carefully, noting Zara's torn green jacket, the blood on her scraped hands, and her calm demeanor despite being pinned beneath Pierce's weight. The physical evidence didn't match Pierce's narrative. "Ma'am, are you injured?" Officer Santos asked Zara directly, ignoring Pierce's attempts to control the narrative. "Yes," Zara replied clearly. "This man tackled me from behind without warning while I was shopping. I need medical attention, and I need to speak with Detective Ortiz privately." Pierce's face flushed with anger at losing control of the situation. "Don't listen to her lies. I have security footage proving she's a criminal. These people always claim brutality when they get caught stealing." Officer Santos' expression hardened at Pierce's racist language. She had heard enough false accusations from store managers to recognize when someone was covering up their own misconduct. "Sir, remove your knee from this woman immediately, or you'll be arrested for assault." Reluctantly, Pierce climbed off Zara's back, his hands shaking with rage and adrenaline. As soon as the pressure released, Zara slowly pushed herself into a sitting position, wincing as pain shot through her injured shoulder. Detective Ortiz entered the store, his eyes quickly scanning the scene and noting the positions of witnesses, cameras, and the obvious signs of assault. His radio crackled with an encrypted message from FBI agent Kai Patel. "Federal asset involved. Proceed with extreme caution." The detective's training kicked in as he realized this wasn't a simple shoplifting case. Federal involvement meant organized crime, interstate jurisdiction, and career-making or career-ending decisions based on how he handled the next few minutes. Freya Wilson approached Detective Ortiz, her phone still recording. "Officer, I filmed the entire assault. This store manager tackled that woman without provocation. She never resisted, never fought back, never stole anything." Other customers began volunteering their witness statements, creating a chorus of testimony that contradicted Pierce's racist narrative. The community was actively rejecting his attempt to criminalize an innocent customer. "I need everyone to step back and give us space to investigate," Detective Ortiz announced. "But please don't delete any video footage. We'll need those recordings for our investigation." Pierce's confident smile began to fade as he realized the police weren't automatically accepting his version of events. His racist assumptions about law enforcement support were colliding with the reality of professional officers trained to investigate rather than validate prejudice. EMS personnel entered the store, immediately moving toward Zara to assess her injuries. The scraped hands, torn jacket, and potential spinal damage from Pierce's knee required medical documentation that would later become evidence in federal court. As Detective Ortiz coordinated the scene, his earpiece buzzed with another encrypted message. Federal agents approaching. Prepare for jurisdiction transfer. Agent Kai Patel walked through the automatic doors of Riverside Grocery with the confident stride of someone who had been waiting 3 months for this moment. His FBI credentials were visible in his left hand, while his right hand rested on his service weapon, ready for any situation that might escalate beyond peaceful resolution. The store fell silent as customers recognized federal authority entering their small-town drama. Phones continued recording, but the atmosphere shifted from local incident to national significance. With Kai's presence, Detective Ortiz approached immediately, recognizing the jurisdiction implications. Agent Patel? I'm Detective Ortiz. We received notice about federal involvement. Detective, thank you for securing the scene. Kai replied professionally. The individual who was assaulted is Special Agent Zara Novak, FBI Cyber Division. She's been conducting an undercover investigation into interstate fraud operations. The words hit Landon Pierce like a physical blow. His face went white as the full implications crashed down on him. FBI agent, undercover investigation, interstate fraud. Every accusation he had screamed, every racist assumption he had voiced, every crime he had committed was against a federal law enforcement officer. That's impossible, Pierce whispered, his voice barely audible. She's just a customer. Zara slowly stood up with assistance from the EMS personnel, her torn green jacket and bloodied hands providing stark evidence of Pierce's assault. When she reached into her inner jacket pocket and withdrew her FBI credentials, the entire store seemed to hold its breath. Special Agent Zara Novak, Federal Bureau of Investigation, she announced clearly, her voice carrying across the store and into every recording device. Mr. Pierce, you are under arrest for assaulting a federal officer during the execution of an undercover investigation. Pierce's legs gave out, forcing him to grab a shopping cart for support. The racist store manager who had brutalized what he thought was a powerless black customer had actually assaulted one of the FBI's most skilled cybercrime investigators. This can't be happening, Pierce muttered, his voice shaking. I was protecting my store. I was stopping a criminal. Agent Kai approached Pierce with handcuffs ready. Landon Pierce, you are under arrest for assault on a federal officer, civil rights violations, conspiracy to commit wire fraud, money laundering, and operating a criminal enterprise. You have the right to remain silent. As the Miranda rights echoed through the grocery store, customers began to understand. They had witnessed something historic. The racist assault they had recorded was actually the climactic moment of a major federal investigation into international cybercrime. Freya Wilson looked at her phone screen, realizing her video documentation had captured the arrest of a federal fugitive. I can't believe I was shopping for milk and ended up filming the FBI. Dr. Isabella Cruz's voice crackled through Agent Kai's earpiece. Kai, we've got search warrants for the store's computer systems, Pierce's home, and his financial records. Technical teams are moving in now. Pierce's racist worldview was collapsing in real time as federal agents swarmed his store. The black woman he had brutalized wasn't a criminal. She was the agent of justice who would destroy his criminal empire. The credit card skimmers, the international money transfers, the targeting of minority customers, Zara explained to Detective Ortiz while EMS treated her injuries. We've been building this case for months. Pierce's assault just provided the probable cause we needed for immediate arrests. As Pierce was led away in handcuffs, he turned back toward Zara with desperate confusion. How was I supposed to know? You seemed like. I looked like what, Mr. Pierce? Zara's voice was steady, professional, but edged with the authority of someone who had just taken down an international criminal network. I looked like someone you could assault without consequences. Pierce had no answer. His racist assumptions had destroyed his life and exposed a criminal conspiracy that would make headlines across the nation. The grocery store that had seemed like the perfect cover for financial crimes had become the stage for federal justice. 6 weeks before the assault, Agent Zara Novak sat in the FBI's Denver field office, studying architectural blueprints of Riverside Grocery, while Dr. Isabella Cruz explained the technical infrastructure they would need to penetrate Pierce's criminal operation. The credit card skimmers are embedded in the point-of-sale systems. Dr. Cruz pointed to the store's layout on her computer screen. Military-grade encryption suggests foreign technical support, but Pierce is definitely the local access point. Agent Kai Patel spread surveillance photos across the conference table, showing Pierce's daily routines, his interactions with customers, and his suspicious meetings with unknown individuals in the store's back office. Pierce meets with the same unidentified male every Tuesday at 2 p.m., Kai explained. White male, approximately 45 years old, drives different rental cars each week. They exchange briefcases in the storage room, away from security cameras. Assistant U.S. Attorney Chloe Harris reviewed the legal framework for the undercover operation, ensuring every piece of evidence would be admissible in federal court. We need Zara to document the technical infrastructure, identify the foreign contacts, and establish Pierce's knowledge of the interstate fraud network. The operation required delicate precision. Zara would establish herself as a regular customer over several weeks, gradually becoming a target for Pierce's profiling and fraud schemes. Hidden recording devices would capture his criminal methods, while FBI technical teams monitored the data theft in real time. The psychological profile suggests Pierce will escalate quickly once he targets you, warned FBI behavioral analyst Dr. Sarah Chen via video conference. His racism combined with paranoia creates a volatile personality that could become physically dangerous. Zara reviewed Pierce's history of violence, including 2 previous assault charges against minority customers that had been dismissed due to lack of witness cooperation and systemic bias in the local justice system. That's why the community documentation is crucial, Zara observed. We need multiple witnesses recording everything, so Pierce can't claim self-defense or justify his actions through racist assumptions. The FBI technical team had already infiltrated Riverside Grocery's computer networks, installing monitoring software that would track every transaction while documenting Pierce's criminal activities. Federal surveillance would capture both the cybercrime and any physical violence Pierce might commit. Once Pierce targets you, he'll use the same methods he's used on dozens of previous victims, Dr. Cruz explained. Credit card skimming, false accusations, intimidation tactics designed to prevent victims from reporting the crimes. Agent Kai would coordinate surveillance from the mobile command post, monitoring multiple camera feeds, while staying ready to intervene if Pierce's violence threatened Zara's safety. Local police detective Liam Ortiz would provide liaison support without compromising the federal investigation. The beauty of this operation, Chloe Harris noted, is that Pierce's own racism will provide the evidence we need. His targeting of minority customers is part of the criminal conspiracy, making his bias a federal crime rather than just personal prejudice. Over 6 weeks, Zara made regular shopping trips to Riverside Grocery, carefully establishing patterns that would trigger Pierce's profiling instincts. She varied her clothing, shopping times, and payment methods, while FBI cameras documented Pierce's increasing surveillance of her activities. Week 3, Pierce started following you through the store, Kai reported during one of their briefings. Week 4, he began checking your credit cards manually. Week 5, he positioned security cameras specifically to track your movements. The federal investigation was documenting every step of Pierce's criminal escalation, creating an airtight case that would expose not just his local fraud operation, but the international networks that supported it. Pierce doesn't know he's being watched by the FBI, Dr. Cruz observed. But he also doesn't know that his foreign contacts are already under surveillance by Interpol and the CIA. This grocery store investigation is part of a much larger operation targeting Eastern European cybercrime networks. The true scope of Landon Pierce's criminal operation stretched far beyond the suburban grocery store, where he had just been arrested. As FBI agents executed search warrants across multiple locations, the evidence revealed a sophisticated international conspiracy that had been hiding behind small-town normalcy. In Pierce's office behind the Riverside Grocery customer service counter, FBI technical specialist Agent Maria Gonzalez discovered computer equipment worth more than Pierce's annual salary, high-end servers, encrypted communication devices, and banking software that required advanced cybersecurity knowledge to operate. "This isn't small-time credit card fraud," Agent Gonzalez reported to Dr. Isabella Cruz via encrypted radio. "We're looking at enterprise-level criminal infrastructure. Someone invested serious money in this operation." Dr. Cruz reviewed the financial data flowing across her screens in the FBI Mobile Command Center. Bank accounts in Pierce's name showed deposits totaling over $400,000 during the past 18 months, far exceeding what any grocery store manager could legitimately earn. The money trail leads through shell companies in Romania, cryptocurrency exchanges in Moscow, and ultimately into accounts controlled by the Kozlov cybercrime syndicate. Dr. Cruz explained to Agent Kai Patel, Pierce was a local asset in a global money laundering operation. The Kozlov syndicate had been on FBI watch lists for years, suspected of running credit card fraud operations across 12 countries by recruiting racist store managers like Pierce. They had found the perfect method for harvesting financial data from American consumers while avoiding detection. "Look at these victim profiles," Agent Kai observed, reviewing the customer database Pierce had been maintaining. Every targeted customer fits the same demographic: minority communities, elderly residents, single mothers, people whose fraud complaints typically get ignored by banks and police. Pierce's racism wasn't just personal prejudice. It was a carefully exploited tool in an international criminal conspiracy. The Kozlov syndicate had identified American racial bias as a protective mechanism for their fraud operations. At Pierce's home, federal agents discovered a basement office equipped with multiple computers, encrypted hard drives, and detailed files on hundreds of Riverside Grocery customers. Maps on the wall showed planned expansion to grocery stores in 6 additional states. Pierce wasn't just running one store, Assistant U.S. Attorney Chloe Harris observed as she reviewed the evidence. He was training other racist store managers to replicate this operation across the country. The training materials were disturbing in their systematic approach to racial profiling. Pierce had developed detailed guides for identifying high-value targets based on racist stereotypes, methods for installing skimming equipment, and psychological techniques for intimidating victims who discovered the fraud. "This is a manual for weaponizing racism," Detective Liam Ortiz said as he read through Pierce's recruitment documents. "They're teaching store managers how to use racial bias as a tool for organized crime." Federal agents raiding the Kozlov syndicate's American headquarters in Detroit discovered that Pierce was one of 12 store managers operating similar fraud schemes across the Midwest. Each location targeted minority communities specifically because complaints from those victims were less likely to trigger serious investigations. "The psychological manipulation is sophisticated," FBI behavioral analyst Dr. Sarah Chen explained during the operational briefing. "They're exploiting both individual racism and systemic bias to create a nearly perfect criminal operation." Dr. Cruz's analysis of the stolen financial data revealed the international scope of the conspiracy. Credit card information harvested from Pierce's store was being used for fraudulent purchases in 15 countries, funding everything from human trafficking to terrorist financing. Pierce thought he was running a local scam to make extra money. Agent Kai summarized as federal teams continued processing evidence. Instead, he was feeding American financial data to international criminals who were using it to fund organized crime across multiple continents. The arrest of one racist store manager had exposed a criminal network that stretched from suburban grocery stores to international terrorism. Pierce's assault on agent Zara Novak had provided the legal justification to dismantle a conspiracy that had been operating undetected for years. As Pierce sat in federal custody, still trying to understand how his racist assumptions had led to his arrest by the FBI, international law enforcement agencies were coordinating raids against his foreign contacts. The grocery store that had seemed like a perfect cover for crime had become the entry point for justice. Federal agents moved through Riverside Grocery with the coordinated precision of a military operation. Within minutes of Pierce's arrest, the store had been transformed into a crime scene, with FBI technical specialists documenting every piece of evidence that would expose the international conspiracy. Agent Maria Gonzalez led the technical team to Pierce's office, where hidden servers and encrypted communication devices revealed the true scope of his criminal operation. "We've got multiple hard drives connected to overseas networks," she reported through her radio. "This equipment is worth more than the entire grocery store." Dr. Isabella Cruz coordinated the digital evidence collection from the FBI Mobile Command Center, her screens displaying real-time data flows that connected Pierce's operation to criminal networks spanning 3 continents. The encryption signatures match known Kozlov syndicate protocols, she confirmed. Pierce was definitely a recruited asset. As Pierce sat in handcuffs near the produce section, he watched federal agents dismantle the criminal empire he had believed was his personal money-making scheme. His face showed the dawning realization that he had been a small piece in a much larger operation. "Mr. Pierce," Agent Zara Novak approached, her torn green jacket replaced with an FBI windbreaker. "You have the right to cooperate with federal investigators. Your foreign contacts have already been identified through surveillance. Your only option now is to minimize your sentence by providing complete information about your recruitment and training." Pierce's hands trembled as he stared at the woman he had brutally assaulted just 2 hours earlier. "I didn't know. They told me it was just credit card information. Easy money for targeting certain customers." "Certain customers?" Zara's voice carried the authority of someone who had just dismantled an international criminal network. "You mean minority customers? Elderly customers? People you assumed the system would ignore?" The racist targeting wasn't accidental. It was the core strategy that had made Pierce valuable to international criminals. His willingness to profile and intimidate minority victims had made him the perfect local asset for a global fraud operation. Assistant U.S. Attorney Chloe Harris entered the store, her presence signaling that federal charges would be filed immediately. She surveyed the evidence collection while coordinating with international law enforcement agencies, preparing simultaneous raids across multiple countries. "Pierce, we have documented communications between you and Dmitry Kozlov's organization dating back 18 months, Harris announced. "Credit card data from your store has been used to fund human trafficking operations in Eastern Europe. You're facing federal charges for conspiracy, money laundering, and providing material support to international organized crime." Pierce's face went white as he understood that his grocery store fraud had connected him to human trafficking and international terrorism. "I just installed some equipment and targeted customers who looked suspicious. I didn't know about trafficking or terrorism." "Looked suspicious?" Agent Kai Patel joined the conversation, his voice edged with controlled anger. "You targeted black customers, elderly customers, and single mothers because you assumed their fraud complaints would be ignored. Your racism was a tool for international criminals." The arrest extended beyond Pierce to include 3 store employees who had been recruited as accomplices. Cashier supervisor Jennifer Walsh, who had helped install skimming devices, was led away in handcuffs while protesting her innocence. "I just followed Pierce's instructions," Walsh sobbed as federal agents read her Miranda rights. "He said we were preventing fraud by monitoring suspicious customers." Security guard Thomas Brennan, who had been intimidating customers who complained about unauthorized charges, was also arrested for his role in the conspiracy. His participation had helped Pierce maintain operational security by discouraging victims from reporting the crimes. The entire operation depended on local racism and intimidation, Dr. Cruz explained to the arrest team. Pierce recruited employees who shared his prejudices, creating a local criminal cell that international criminals could exploit. Detective Liam Ortiz coordinated with federal agents to ensure that local charges would be filed in addition to federal violations. Pierce's assault on Agent Novak had occurred in local jurisdiction, making him subject to both state and federal prosecution. Pierce will face federal charges for the international conspiracy and local charges for assaulting a law enforcement officer, Detective Ortiz confirmed. His racist violence will be prosecuted at every level of the justice system. Freya Wilson sat in the FBI field office, her phone containing video footage that would become crucial evidence in the prosecution of an international criminal conspiracy. The grocery shopping trip that had started as a routine errand had transformed her into a key witness in a federal case. Mrs. Wilson, your video documentation captured not only Pierce's assault, but also his racist statements and false police reports. Agent Kai Patel explained, as he prepared her witness statement, your footage will be essential for proving the civil rights violations and assault charges. Freya reviewed her phone video, watching Pierce's violent takedown of Agent Novak, while his racist assumptions poured out for the cameras. I can't believe I was just buying groceries and ended up filming a federal investigation. The witness protection concerns weren't theoretical. Pierce's connections to the Kozlov syndicate meant that witnesses could face retaliation from international criminals with sophisticated capabilities for intimidation and violence. The Kozlov organization has a history of targeting witnesses, FBI agent Sarah Martinez explained to the witness protection team. They've used everything from cyber harassment to physical threats against people who testify against their operations. Agent Novak joined the witness briefing, her arm in a sling from the shoulder injury sustained during Pierce's assault. Despite her physical discomfort, she was determined to ensure that community witnesses felt safe about testifying. Mrs. Wilson, your courage in recording that assault prevented Pierce from claiming self-defense or justifying his actions, Zara said. But we need to ensure your safety throughout the prosecution process. Freya's teenage daughter, Emma, who had witnessed the assault, was also included in the protection planning. Mom, are we going to be safe? Those people on the news looked really scary, Emma asked, referring to international news coverage of Kozlov syndicate arrests. Assistant U.S. Attorney Chloe Harris addressed the family's concerns directly. The federal government takes witness protection seriously. We have protocols for ensuring your safety while maintaining your normal lives as much as possible. The protection plan included regular security checks, encrypted communication devices, and FBI monitoring of online threats. Other customer witnesses, including elderly customer Robert Hayes, received similar protection arrangements. Mr. Hayes, your testimony about Pierce's racist language and unprovoked assault will help establish the civil rights violations, Agent Kai explained to the 74-year-old retiree. But we want to ensure that you feel completely safe testifying. Robert Hayes had lived through the civil rights era and understood the historical significance of his testimony. Son, I've seen racism my whole life, but I've never seen it connected to international crime like this. If my testimony helps stop these criminals, then that's what I need to do. Dr. Isabella Cruz briefed the witnesses on the international scope of the case they were supporting. Your testimony about Pierce's local actions will help prosecutors prove the connection to global criminal networks. This case could prevent similar operations in other communities. The community response to the Witness Protection Program revealed how Pierce's racism had affected the entire neighborhood. Multiple customers came forward with stories of suspicious incidents, discriminatory treatment, and financial fraud they had attributed to random bad luck. Pierce had been targeting our community for months, explained Maria Santos, a local teacher who had experienced unauthorized charges after shopping at Riverside Grocery. We thought it was just bad customer service, but it was actually organized crime. Federal agents documented dozens of additional victims who had been targeted by Pierce's operation, creating a comprehensive picture of how international criminals had exploited local racism to victimize entire communities. The Witness Protection Program isn't just about individual safety, Agent Martinez emphasized. It's about protecting the community's ability to seek justice when criminal organizations try to exploit racial bias and systemic discrimination. As federal protection teams coordinated security for multiple witnesses, the full impact of Pierce's criminal enterprise became clear. His assault on Agent Novak had been the culminating act of a conspiracy that had victimized hundreds of innocent customers while funding international crime. Dr. Isabella Cruz stood before a wall of monitors in the FBI's Digital Forensics Laboratory, analyzing the massive data breach that Pierce's operation had enabled over 18 months of criminal activity. The scope of the financial crime was staggering. Over 50,000 customers had their credit card information harvested and sold to international criminal networks. Every transaction at Riverside Grocery was compromised, Dr. Cruz explained to the federal prosecution team via video conference. Pierce's skimming devices captured not just credit card numbers but also PIN codes, security codes, and personal identification information. Assistant U.S. Attorney Chloe Harris reviewed the financial impact data, preparing to present evidence that would demonstrate the international scope of the conspiracy. Dr. Cruz, what's the estimated monetary damage to victims? Conservative estimate $12.4 million in direct financial losses, but the identity theft consequences extend much further, Dr. Cruz replied, highlighting data streams on her primary monitor. Stolen information from Pierce's store has been used for mortgage fraud, medical identity theft, and tax refund fraud across 15 countries. Agent Zara Novak, her arm still in a sling from Pierce's assault, joined the digital evidence review from her hospital bed via secure video link. The technical sophistication suggests Pierce was trained by cybersecurity professionals. His equipment required advanced knowledge to install and maintain. The analysis revealed that Pierce had received extensive training in data harvesting techniques, encryption methods, and victim targeting strategies. His racism hadn't been exploited accidentally. It had been deliberately weaponized by international criminals who understood American social dynamics. Look at these communication logs. Agent Kai Patel highlighted encrypted messages between Pierce and his foreign handlers. They specifically instructed him to target low-credibility demographics who would face skepticism when reporting financial crimes. The criminal psychology was disturbing in its calculated precision. International conspirators had identified American racial bias as a protective mechanism for their operations, recruiting local assets who would naturally target the communities most likely to be ignored by law enforcement. Pierce received performance bonuses based on the demographic profile of his victims, Dr. Cruz revealed, displaying payment records from offshore accounts. Higher payouts for targeting elderly black customers, single mothers, and immigrants, anyone whose fraud complaints would typically face systemic dismissal. Federal forensic accountants traced the money trail through shell companies in Romania, cryptocurrency exchanges in Russia, and ultimately into accounts controlled by the Kozlov syndicate. Pierce's grocery store had been a data collection point feeding a global criminal empire. The stolen credit card information was packaged and sold on dark web marketplaces. Dr. Cruz continued, showing screenshots of criminal websites where Pierce's harvested data was advertised to buyers worldwide. Customer information from Riverside Grocery was branded as premium American datasets because of the detailed personal information Pierce was able to collect. Agent Maria Gonzalez, who had led the technical evidence collection at the store, reported on the sophisticated equipment discovered in Pierce's operation. Military-grade encryption devices, professional data storage systems, and communication equipment worth over $200,000, far beyond what any store manager could afford. The international coordination extended beyond simple credit card fraud. FBI analysis revealed that stolen financial information was being used to fund human trafficking operations, drug smuggling networks, and terrorist financing schemes across Eastern Europe and the Middle East. Pierce thought he was making easy money by targeting customers he disliked, Agent Kai observed grimly. Instead, he was providing financial resources for international organized crime that has killed thousands of people. Dr. Cruz's digital forensics team had also uncovered Pierce's recruitment network, identifying 12 other racist store managers across 6 states who had been trained to replicate the Riverside Grocery operation. Each location targeted minority communities using identical methods and equipment. This wasn't an isolated operation, Dr. Cruz emphasized. Pierce was part of a systematic exploitation of American racial bias for international criminal profit. The Kozlov Syndicate had identified racism as their most effective tool for avoiding detection. FBI agent Zara Martinez coordinated with international law enforcement agencies as the investigation expanded beyond American borders. Pierce's arrest had triggered simultaneous raids across 3 continents, revealing a criminal network that used small-town racism to fund global terrorism and human trafficking. Interpol confirms arrests in Romania, Russia, and Moldova. Agent Martinez reported to the Joint Task Force. The Kozlov Syndicate was using Pierce's data to create false identities for human trafficking victims being transported across European borders. The international scope was breathtaking. Credit card information stolen from customers shopping for groceries in suburban America was being used to forge documents for young women being trafficked across Eastern Europe. Pierce's racism had enabled crimes against humanity on a global scale. Dr. Isabella Cruz presented her analysis of the financial networks to representatives from the CIA, NSA, and international intelligence agencies. Money from Pierce's operation was laundered through legitimate businesses and ultimately used to purchase weapons for terrorist organizations in Syria and Afghanistan. Agent Zara Novak joined the international briefing via secure video from her hospital room, providing first-hand insight into Pierce's psychological profile and criminal methods. Pierce genuinely believed his racist assumptions were protecting American society from criminals. He had no understanding that he was the criminal facilitating international terrorism. The investigation revealed that the Kozlov Syndicate had spent years studying American social dynamics, identifying racial bias as their most effective tool for criminal operations. They recruited store managers, security guards, and other local officials who would naturally target minority communities. The psychological manipulation was sophisticated. FBI behavioral analyst Dr. Sarah Chen explained to the International Task Force. They exploited existing racist attitudes rather than creating them, making their local assets believe they were patriots protecting their communities. British intelligence reported that stolen financial information from Pierce's store had been used to fund the 2023 London Bridge terror plot, which had been prevented only through international intelligence cooperation. American grocery store customers had their identities stolen to fund terrorist attacks against British civilians. MI6 representative James Crawford explained. German authorities confirmed that Pierce's data had been used to create false identities for a human trafficking ring that had enslaved over 200 young women across Central Europe. The same credit card information used to buy groceries in Colorado was used to forge documents that trapped women in sexual slavery, BKA investigator Klaus Weber reported. The connection between Pierce's racist assault on Agent Novak and international crimes against humanity created unprecedented legal implications. His violent racism wasn't just a local civil rights violation. It had enabled global atrocities. Assistant U.S. Attorney Chloe Harris coordinated with international prosecutors to ensure that Pierce's prosecution would support broader efforts against the Kozlov Syndicate. Pierce's assault on Agent Novak provided the legal justification for raids that disrupted a criminal network operating on 4 continents. Russian FSB cooperation, rare in criminal investigations, was provided due to the Kozlov Syndicate's threat to Russian national security. Even Russian authorities wanted this network stopped, Agent Martinez explained. Their criminal activities were destabilizing legitimate business operations in Moscow. Dr. Cruz's analysis of international data flows revealed that Pierce's operation had been a testing ground for criminal methods that were being replicated across 12 countries. The Kozlov Syndicate was using American racism as a prototype for exploiting ethnic tensions in other societies. The global implications extended beyond financial crime to international security. Pierce's grocery store operation had helped fund terrorism, human trafficking, and weapons smuggling that threatened democratic governments worldwide. Pierce's racist assumptions about his customers enabled international criminals to threaten global security, Agent Novak observed from her hospital bed. His assault on me wasn't just personal violence. It was part of a conspiracy that has killed innocent people across multiple continents. As international arrest warrants were executed across 3 time zones, Pierce sat in federal custody, slowly learning that his racist brutality had connected him to the worst forms of international organized crime. The federal courthouse in Denver was surrounded by media crews and protesters as Assistant U.S. Attorney Chloe Harris prepared to present one of the most significant cybercrime cases in recent history. Pierce's assault on Agent Zara Novak had exposed an international criminal conspiracy that connected small-town racism to global terrorism and human trafficking. The United States versus Landon Pierce represents more than individual criminal charges, Harris explained to reporters gathered outside the courthouse. This case demonstrates how domestic prejudice can be weaponized by international criminals to threaten global security. Federal Judge Maria Rodriguez reviewed the extensive evidence package, including video footage of Pierce's assault, digital forensics proving the international conspiracy, and testimony from victims across multiple countries. The legal proceedings would establish precedents for prosecuting racism as a tool of international organized crime. Pierce sat at the defendant's table with his court-appointed attorney, Donald Marsh, a public defender overwhelmed by the complexity of international criminal law. Pierce's family had disowned him after learning about his connections to terrorism and human trafficking, leaving him isolated and defenseless. Mr. Pierce, you are charged with assault on a federal officer, conspiracy to commit wire fraud, money laundering, providing material support to international organized crime, and civil rights violations, Judge Rodriguez announced as the formal proceedings began. Agent Zara Novak entered the courtroom with her arms still in a sling, prepared to testify about the months-long investigation that had led to Pierce's violent exposure. Her presence drew supportive applause from community members who had traveled from across the state to witness justice being served. Agent Novak, please describe the undercover operation that led to Mr. Pierce's assault on your person. Harris began her direct examination. Zara's testimony was precise and professional, detailing how Pierce's racist profiling had made him the perfect asset for international criminals. Pierce targeted customers based on racial stereotypes, believing that minority victims would face systemic skepticism when reporting financial crimes. The video footage of Pierce's assault played on courtroom monitors, showing his violent takedown of Zara while screaming racist assumptions about her character and criminal intent. The brutal imagery created an emotional impact that legal arguments alone could never achieve. Mr. Pierce's attack wasn't spontaneous violence, Harris explained to the jury. It was the culmination of a systematic pattern of racist targeting that enabled international criminals to exploit American customers and fund global terrorism. Defense attorney Marsh attempted to minimize Pierce's role, arguing that he had been manipulated by sophisticated international criminals who exploited his local prejudices. My client was a pawn in a larger conspiracy that he never fully understood. Harris destroyed this defense by presenting evidence of Pierce's extensive training, his performance-based payments for targeting specific demographics, and his active recruitment of other racist store managers. Pierce wasn't a victim of manipulation. He was an enthusiastic participant in international organized crime. Dr. Isabella Cruz testified as an expert witness, explaining how Pierce's operation had enabled crimes against humanity across multiple continents. Credit card information stolen from innocent customers shopping for groceries was used to forge documents for human trafficking victims and fund terrorist attacks. The international scope was demonstrated through video testimony from British and German law enforcement officials who had investigated terrorism and human trafficking operations funded by Pierce's criminal enterprise. The connection between local racism and global atrocities was undeniable. Freya Wilson's video footage of the assault was played multiple times, showing Pierce's racist language and unprovoked violence against an innocent customer. Her courage in documenting the attack had provided crucial evidence for both criminal prosecution and civil rights violations. Mrs. Wilson's video captures not just criminal assault, but the racist assumptions that made Pierce valuable to international criminals. Harris explained to the jury, his willingness to target and brutalize minority customers was the foundation of a global criminal conspiracy. Agent Kai Patel testified about the international investigation that had identified Pierce as a local asset in the Kozlov Syndicate's American operations. Pierce believed he was protecting his community from criminals, when actually he was the criminal endangering his community and enabling international terrorism. The revelation that Riverside Grocery had been a front for international organized crime sent shockwaves through the suburban community that had trusted Pierce as their neighborhood store manager. Local residents gathered at town hall meetings demanding answers about how their daily shopping had funded terrorism and human trafficking. Maria Santos, the local teacher, whose credit card had been compromised by Pierce's operation, addressed the packed community center. We trusted this man to serve our families, and he was stealing our identities to fund crimes against children on the other side of the world. The community impact extended beyond financial losses to emotional trauma and destroyed trust in local institutions. Families discovered that their grocery shopping had enabled the enslavement of women, the funding of terrorist attacks, and the destabilization of democratic governments worldwide. How do we explain to our children that buying milk and bread helped fund human trafficking? Asked Robert Hayes, the elderly customer who had witnessed Pierce's assault on Agent Novak. This man violated everything we thought we knew about our community. Detective Liam Ortiz coordinated with Federal Victim Services to provide counseling and financial assistance to the hundreds of local residents whose information had been stolen. The psychological impact of learning that routine activities had enabled international atrocities required professional intervention. Many victims are experiencing trauma, not just from the financial crimes, but from learning that their personal information was used to hurt innocent people worldwide, explained FBI victim advocate Dr. Jennifer Walsh. The emotional complexity of these cases requires specialized support services. Local business leaders faced difficult questions about their failure to detect Pierce's criminal operation, despite obvious warning signs. The sophisticated equipment, unexplained wealth, and discriminatory customer service should have triggered investigations long before federal intervention. We failed our community by not questioning Pierce's behavior, admitted grocery store district manager Paul Richardson. His racist treatment of customers wasn't just morally wrong. It was enabling international organized crime. The class action lawsuit against the grocery store chain attracted victims from across 6 states, all seeking compensation for financial losses and emotional trauma. The corporate liability extended beyond Pierce's individual actions to systemic failures in oversight and employee screening. Riverside Foods Corporation had a responsibility to monitor their employees and protect customer data, explained plaintiff's attorney Sarah Mitchell. Their negligence enabled an international criminal conspiracy that harmed thousands of innocent people. Community religious leaders organized prayer services and healing circles to help residents process the trauma of learning that their neighborhood had been exploited by international criminals. The spiritual impact of contributing unknowingly to global atrocities required faith-based intervention. We must find ways to heal from this violation of trust while recommitting ourselves to protecting vulnerable people everywhere, said Reverend Michael Thompson at an interfaith community gathering. Local schools implemented educational programs about cybercrime, racism, and international security to help students understand how local actions can have global consequences. The Pierce case became a teaching moment about the interconnected nature of modern criminal networks. Students need to understand that racism isn't just local prejudice. It can be exploited by international criminals to threaten global security, explained high school civics teacher Laura Chen. The community response also included activism and advocacy, with residents organizing to support federal legislation strengthening cybersecurity requirements for small businesses and improving victim services for international crime. Pierce's crimes happened here, but the victims are worldwide, observed community activist James Rodriguez. Our responsibility extends beyond our neighborhood to supporting justice for everyone harmed by this conspiracy. As federal proceedings continued, the community began rebuilding trust while maintaining vigilance against future exploitation. The grocery store reopened under new management with enhanced security measures and community oversight to prevent similar criminal infiltration. The economic impact on local families was devastating and far-reaching. Janet Morrison, a single mother of 3, discovered that her credit card information had been used to purchase weapons that were shipped to Syria. "I was buying formula for my baby, and somehow that helped armed terrorists who kill children," she said through tears at a victim support meeting. "How do I live with that knowledge?" Her story was repeated hundreds of times across the community. Elderly residents on fixed incomes found their savings accounts drained by fraudulent charges made with information stolen during routine grocery visits. Young families faced foreclosure when their compromised credit information was used for mortgage fraud in foreign countries. The Psychological Counseling Center established by Federal Victim Services was overwhelmed with residents seeking help to process the complex trauma of unknowing complicity in international crimes. Dr. Amanda Foster, the lead trauma counselor, explained the unique challenges these victims faced. "Traditional fraud victims feel violated and angry, which are normal responses," Dr. Foster observed. "But these victims also feel guilt and moral distress because their stolen information was used to harm innocent people worldwide. They're struggling with feelings of responsibility for crimes they never committed." Support groups formed naturally as neighbors discovered shared experiences of financial violation and moral injury. The basement of St. Matthew's Church became a weekly gathering place for victims to share their stories and find collective healing. "We were all Pierce's targets because of who we are and what he assumed about us," reflected community organizer Angela Davis, whose elderly mother had been specifically targeted by Pierce's discriminatory practices. "But now we're finding strength in standing together against the system that allowed this to happen." The investigation revealed that Pierce's targeting strategy had disproportionately affected the community's most vulnerable residents. Immigrants, elderly residents, and single-parent households had been systematically victimized because Pierce believed their complaints would be dismissed by authorities. "Pierce weaponized every stereotype and prejudice to select his victims," explained FBI victim advocate Carla Rodriguez. "He targeted people he assumed would be ignored, overlooked, or disbelieved when they reported crimes against them." Local businesses felt the economic ripple effects as customers became afraid to use credit cards anywhere in the community. The farmers market, local restaurants, and small shops all reported significant decreases in revenue as residents switched to cash-only transactions. "People are scared to trust anyone with their financial information," said farmers market coordinator Tom Bradley. "Pierce didn't just steal from individuals. He stole the community's faith in commerce and normal business relationships." The children in the community struggled to understand how their routine activities had connected them to international violence. School counselors reported increased anxiety, nightmares, and questions about safety that required age-appropriate explanations of complex global criminal networks. "My daughter asks if buying groceries makes us bad people," explained parent Michelle Chen. "How do you tell a 7-year-old that bad people used our shopping to hurt other families around the world?" Educational initiatives expanded beyond the schools to include community-wide programs about recognizing and preventing cybercrime. The local library hosted weekly seminars on digital security, while community college offered courses on understanding international criminal networks. "We can't prevent every crime, but we can educate ourselves to recognize the warning signs," said librarian Susan Hayes, who had organized the cybersecurity education program. "Pierce's operation succeeded partly because none of us understood what sophisticated cybercrime looks like." The legal ramifications extended to local government officials, who faced questions about their failure to investigate complaints about Pierce's discriminatory behavior. City council meetings became forums for residents to demand accountability and improved oversight of local businesses. Multiple residents filed complaints about Pierce's racist treatment, but those complaints were dismissed or ignored, said resident advocate Patricia Williams. "Our local government failed to protect us, And that failure enabled international terrorism. Mayor Patricia Anderson announced a comprehensive review of city policies regarding discrimination complaints and business oversight. We must ensure that future complaints about discriminatory business practices receive serious investigation rather than bureaucratic dismissal. The media attention brought national scrutiny to the community's handling of racial discrimination and cybercrime vulnerability. National news networks reported from Riverside Grocery, interviewing residents about how local racism had enabled international terrorism. This story resonates because it shows how individual prejudice can be exploited by global criminals. Observed CNN correspondent Zara Johnson. Pierce's racism wasn't just a local problem. It became a national security threat. Federal agencies used the Pierce case to develop new training materials for local law enforcement about recognizing the intersection of hate crimes and international organized crime. The FBI's community outreach program expanded to include education about how domestic prejudice can be weaponized by foreign adversaries. The Pierce investigation taught us that racism isn't just a civil rights issue. It's a national security vulnerability, explained FBI Community Relations Specialist Agent David Kim. International criminals actively recruit local assets who will target minority communities because they know those victims face systemic barriers to justice. As the community continued healing, grassroots organizations emerged to advocate for stronger consumer protection laws and improved hate crime reporting mechanisms. The Pierce Accountability Project became a national model for communities recovering from complex criminal victimization. "We're not just rebuilding our community," said project coordinator Rebecca Thompson. "We're working to ensure that no other community can be exploited the way we were. Pierce's crimes happened here, but our response can help protect people everywhere." The anniversary of Pierce's assault on Agent Novak became an annual day of remembrance and activism, with community members gathering to honor the victims of international crimes funded through their stolen information while recommitting to vigilance against future exploitation. "We learned that protecting our community requires understanding global threats," concluded Mayor Patricia Anderson. "Pierce's racism made us vulnerable to international criminals who exploited our trust and our prejudices, but our response has made us stronger and more aware of how local actions connect to global consequences." The corporate headquarters of Riverside Foods Corporation in Chicago became the center of a federal investigation as prosecutors examined how the grocery chain had enabled Pierce's international criminal operation through negligent oversight and discriminatory policies that created perfect conditions for organized crime infiltration. Assistant U.S. Attorney Chloe Harris led a team of federal prosecutors in reviewing internal corporate documents that revealed a systematic pattern of ignoring complaints about racist managers and failing to implement basic cybersecurity measures that could have prevented Pierce's operation. Riverside Foods Corporation received 47 formal complaints about Pierce's discriminatory treatment of customers over 18 months. Harris announced at a press conference outside the Chicago headquarters. Every single complaint was dismissed without investigation, creating an environment where international criminals could exploit local racism without interference. Corporate CEO Jonathan Whitfield attempted damage control through media interviews, claiming that Pierce had acted independently without corporate knowledge or support. Mr. Pierce violated every value our company represents. His actions were completely contrary to our corporate policies and training. Federal investigators destroyed this narrative by presenting evidence of corporate policies that actually encouraged the discriminatory behavior Pierce had weaponized for international criminals. Performance reviews rewarded store managers for reducing suspicious customer activity and maintaining asset protection vigilance. These corporate policies were coded language for racial profiling, explained FBI Financial Crimes Specialist Agent Rebecca Torres. Riverside Foods Corporation created incentive structures that rewarded managers like Pierce for targeting minority customers, then claimed ignorance when those same policies enabled international organized crime. The corporate accountability extended beyond Pierce's individual store to the company's systematic failure to protect customer data or monitor employee behavior. Federal cybersecurity audits revealed that Riverside Foods had ignored industry standards for payment security, creating vulnerabilities that sophisticated criminals could exploit. Dr. Isabella Cruz testified before a congressional hearing about corporate cybersecurity failures, explaining how Riverside Foods Corporation's negligent data protection had enabled international terrorism financing. This company's failure to implement basic security measures allowed foreign adversaries to steal American financial information and use it to fund attacks against Democratic allies. The congressional investigation revealed that Riverside Foods Corporation had received federal warnings about cybersecurity vulnerabilities but had chosen to ignore them due to cost concerns. Internal emails showed executives dismissing government security recommendations as unnecessary expenses that would impact quarterly profits. Corporate executives chose short-term profits over customer security and national security, observed Congresswoman Maria Santos during the hearing. Their negligence enabled international criminals to fund terrorism using stolen American financial data. Federal prosecutors filed additional charges against Riverside Foods Corporation for negligent endangerment, failure to protect consumer data, and creating conditions that enabled criminal organizations to operate within their business infrastructure. The corporate criminal liability created precedents for holding companies accountable for employee crimes that result from systematic corporate failures. Riverside Foods Corporation didn't just employ Pierce. They created the conditions that made him valuable to international criminals, Harris explained to the federal grand jury. Their discriminatory policies, negligent cybersecurity, and systematic dismissal of customer complaints enabled a criminal conspiracy that funded terrorism and human trafficking. The financial penalties against Riverside Foods Corporation included $50 million in federal fines, $200 million in victim compensation, and court-ordered cybersecurity improvements across all company locations. The corporate punishment was designed to prevent other companies from creating similar vulnerabilities. Corporate shareholders filed lawsuits against Riverside Foods executives, claiming that their negligent leadership had destroyed company value while enabling international crimes. Stock prices plummeted as investors fled a company associated with terrorism financing and human trafficking. Corporate leadership had a fiduciary responsibility to shareholders and a moral responsibility to customers, explained shareholder attorney David Kim. Their failure on both counts has made this company complicit in international atrocities while destroying investor value. Federal regulations were strengthened based on lessons learned from the Riverside Foods case, requiring enhanced background checks for employees with access to customer financial data and mandatory reporting of discrimination complaints that could indicate criminal exploitation. The Pierce investigation taught us that corporate negligence can become a national security threat, explained Department of Homeland Security Secretary Lisa Chen. We're implementing new requirements to ensure that business failures don't enable foreign adversaries to exploit American consumers. The federal courthouse in Denver was surrounded by international media as the trial of Landon Pierce began, representing one of the most significant cases connecting domestic racism to international terrorism and human trafficking. Federal Judge Maria Rodriguez presided over proceedings that would establish legal precedents for prosecuting hate crimes as tools of organized crime. The United States versus Landon Pierce will demonstrate how individual prejudice can be weaponized by international criminals to threaten global security. Assistant U.S. Attorney Chloe Harris announced in her opening statement, this defendant's racist assault on FBI Special Agent Zara Novak was the culmination of a criminal conspiracy that enabled terrorism, human trafficking, and money laundering across 3 continents. Pierce sat at the defendant's table, his appearance transformed by months in federal custody. The confidence store manager, who had brutally assaulted Agent Novak, had been replaced by a broken man who finally understood that his racist assumptions had connected him to the worst forms of international organized crime. Defense attorney Donald Marsh attempted to portray Pierce as a victim of manipulation, arguing that sophisticated international criminals had exploited his local prejudices without his understanding of the global implications. My client was recruited by professional criminals who took advantage of his limited education and local biases, Harris systematically destroyed this defense by presenting evidence of Pierce's extensive training, his performance-based payments for targeting specific demographics, and his active recruitment of other racist accomplices. Pierce wasn't manipulated, he was an enthusiastic participant who profited from enabling international atrocities. Agent Zara Novak took the witness stand, her professional demeanor commanding respect from jurors who watched her describe the months-long undercover investigation that had exposed Pierce's criminal network. Her arm had healed from the injuries sustained during Pierce's assault, but the psychological impact of being brutalized for her race remained evident in her testimony. Pierce targeted me because I am a black woman, and his racist assumptions made him believe I would be an easy victim. Zara testified. He had no idea that those same racist assumptions had made him valuable to international criminals who were using his prejudices to fund terrorism and human trafficking. The video footage of Pierce's assault played on courtroom monitors, showing his violent takedown of Zara while screaming racist accusations about her character and criminal intent. The brutal imagery created an emotional impact that legal arguments alone could never achieve, demonstrating the intersection of personal racism and international crime. This assault wasn't spontaneous violence, Harris explained to the jury. It was the predictable result of systematic racist targeting that Pierce had been trained to perform by international criminal organizations who understood how to exploit American racial bias for their operational benefit. Dr. Isabella Cruz testified as an expert witness about the technical infrastructure Pierce had helped maintain, explaining how his racist targeting of customers had enabled the harvesting of financial data that funded international terrorism. Her analysis connected Pierce's local actions to global atrocities with scientific precision. Credit card information stolen from Pierce's victims was used to forge documents for human trafficking operations that enslaved over 200 women across Eastern Europe. Dr. Cruz testified. The same financial data was used to fund terrorist attacks that killed innocent civilians in London, Berlin, and Madrid. International law enforcement officials testified via video link about crimes enabled by Pierce's operation, creating a global perspective that demonstrated how his local racism had facilitated international atrocities. British investigators described terrorism plots funded by Pierce's stolen data, while German authorities detailed human trafficking operations that had used falsified documents created with information from his victims. Freya Wilson's video footage of the assault was played multiple times, showing Pierce's racist language and unprovoked violence against an innocent customer. Her courage in documenting the attack had provided crucial evidence that connected Pierce's personal racism to his participation in international organized crime. Mrs. Wilson's video captures the moment when Pierce's racist assumptions exploded into criminal violence, Harris explained to the jury. But more importantly, it documents the psychological profile that made Pierce valuable to international criminals, his willingness to target and brutalize minority customers based on racial stereotypes. Agent Kai Patel testified about the international investigation that had identified Pierce as a local asset in the Kozlov Syndicate's American operations, presenting evidence of Pierce's recruitment, training, and performance evaluations by foreign criminal organizations. Pierce believed he was protecting his community from criminals, Agent Kai explained. In reality, he was the criminal endangering his community while enabling international terrorism that threatened democratic societies worldwide. The prosecution presented financial evidence showing Pierce's profits from the criminal conspiracy, including performance bonuses for successfully targeting minority customers and recruiting other racist accomplices. The systematic nature of his participation contradicted any claims of manipulation or ignorance. Former Riverside Grocery employee Jennifer Walsh, who had been granted immunity in exchange for testimony, took the witness stand to describe Pierce's systematic recruitment and training of accomplices in the criminal operation. Her testimony revealed the calculated nature of Pierce's racist targeting and his deliberate expansion of the conspiracy. Pierce specifically told me to watch for black customers, elderly customers, and single mothers, Walsh testified, her voice shaking as she described her participation in the conspiracy. He said these people were more likely to be criminals and less likely to be believed when they complained about problems with their credit cards. Walsh's testimony revealed Pierce's sophisticated understanding of systemic racism and how it could be exploited to protect criminal operations. He had studied which demographic groups faced skepticism when reporting financial crimes and had systematically targeted those communities. Pierce showed me training materials about psychological profiling and customer targeting, Walsh continued. He said foreign experts had taught him how to identify high-value targets who wouldn't be taken seriously by banks or police when they reported fraud. Defense attorney Marsh attempted to discredit Walsh's testimony by highlighting her own participation in the conspiracy, but Assistant U.S. Attorney Harris used cross-examination to demonstrate how Pierce's racist leadership had corrupted other employees. Ms. Walsh, did Pierce ever explain why targeting minority customers was profitable for the criminal organization? Harris asked. He said, minority victims were disposable assets because the system was already set up to ignore their complaints. Walsh replied, her words creating visible shock among jury members. He said that was why the foreign criminals had chosen him, because he understood how American racism worked. The testimony from Pierce's victims created the most powerful moments of the trial, as customers who had been targeted for their race described the long-term consequences of having their financial information stolen and used to fund international atrocities. Maria Santos, the local teacher, whose credit card information had been used to purchase weapons shipped to Syria, addressed Pierce directly during her victim impact statement. You didn't just steal my money, you made me unknowingly complicit in violence against innocent children. How do you live with yourself? Pierce sat motionless as victim after victim described the devastating impact of his crimes. Elderly customer Robert Hayes, who had witnessed the original assault on Agent Novak, testified about the community's loss of trust and safety. This man didn't just commit crimes. He violated our community's faith in basic human decency, Hayes said, his voice carrying the weight of his 74 years. He turned our neighborhood grocery store into a weapon against innocent people worldwide. The prosecution called Dr. Zara, the FBI behavioral analyst, to explain how Pierce's psychological profile had made him valuable to international criminals seeking to exploit American racial dynamics for operational advantage. Pierce exhibited classic characteristics of someone who could be recruited for discriminatory criminal operations. Dr. Chen testified, his combination of racial prejudice, economic motivation and authority complex made him an ideal asset for foreign criminals who understood how to weaponize American bias. Defense attorney Marsh's cross-examination attempted to portray Pierce as mentally impaired or culturally disadvantaged, but Dr. Chen's analysis demolished these arguments by demonstrating Pierce's sophisticated understanding of criminal techniques and social manipulation. Pierce wasn't mentally impaired, he was criminally intelligent. Dr. Chen explained, his recruitment materials show advanced understanding of psychology, technology, and social engineering. He knew exactly what he was doing and why it was profitable. The international scope of Pierce's crimes was further demonstrated through testimony from Interpol agent Klaus Weber, who appeared via secure video link from Berlin to describe how Pierce's stolen data had been used in German human trafficking operations. Information stolen from Pierce's store was used to create false identity documents for 47 women who were trafficked across European borders, Agent Weber testified. These women were enslaved in brothels from Berlin to Amsterdam, all using falsified documents created with American financial data stolen by Pierce. British intelligence officer Sarah Crawford provided similar testimony about terrorism financing, explaining how Pierce's stolen credit card information had been used to purchase materials for planned terrorist attacks across the United Kingdom. Pierce's operation generated funding that supported at least 3 separate terrorist plots targeting civilian populations in London, Manchester, and Edinburgh, Crawford testified. His racist targeting of American customers directly enabled planned violence against British civilians. The cumulative weight of international testimony created an undeniable connection between Pierce's local racism and global atrocities, demonstrating how individual prejudice had been weaponized by sophisticated criminal networks to threaten international security. Assistant U.S. Attorney Harris concluded her case by presenting evidence that Pierce had been actively recruiting and training other racist store managers across 6 states, showing that his criminal operation was expanding even as the FBI investigation closed in on him. Pierce wasn't just participating in international organized crime, he was building a domestic network of racist accomplices who would enable foreign adversaries to exploit American communities nationwide. Harris told the jury his assault on Agent Novak prevented an expansion of criminal operations that could have funded terrorism and human trafficking for years to come. The prosecution's final evidence included recorded phone conversations between Pierce and his foreign handlers, captured through FBI surveillance during the weeks leading up to his assault on Agent Novak. These recordings revealed Pierce's enthusiastic participation in planning expanded criminal operations. "We need more assets in minority neighborhoods," Pierce could be heard saying in one recording. "I can identify store managers who think like me, who understand which customers are problems and which ones we can exploit." Defense attorney Marsh's closing argument attempted to minimize Pierce's role by emphasizing the sophisticated nature of the international criminal organizations that had recruited him, but the overwhelming evidence of Pierce's active participation and leadership undermined any sympathy for his position. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, Harris concluded in her final statement, Landon Pierce chose to weaponize his racism for profit. He chose to target innocent customers because of their race. He chose to enable international terrorism and human trafficking. These were choices, not mistakes, and justice demands accountability for the consequences of those choices. As the trial moved toward jury deliberation, Pierce sat silent at the defendant's table, finally understanding that his racist assumptions had connected him to the worst forms of international organized crime, and that his assault on Agent Novak had exposed a criminal conspiracy that had funded atrocities across multiple continents. The most powerful moment of the trial came when the prosecution called victims whose lives had been devastated not just by financial fraud, but by the knowledge that their stolen information had been used to fund international atrocities. The federal courtroom fell silent as one by one, ordinary Americans described how Pierce's racist targeting had connected them to global violence. Margaret Williams, an 82-year-old retired teacher, approached the witness stand with the aid of a walker. Her credit card information had been stolen during a routine grocery visit and used to purchase bomb-making materials that were shipped to terrorist cells in Afghanistan. Her voice trembled as she described learning about the connection. "I taught second grade for 45 years, Margaret testified, her eyes fixed on Pierce. "I dedicated my life to protecting children, educating them, helping them grow. And you used my information to buy materials that killed children on the other side of the world." Pierce avoided eye contact as Margaret continued her testimony, describing how the knowledge of unwitting complicity in terrorism had destroyed her peace of mind and faith in humanity. "I wake up every night wondering if any child died because you stole my credit card number while I was buying groceries." Assistant U.S. Attorney Chloe Harris guided Margaret through her testimony, ensuring that jurors understood the personal impact of Pierce's crimes beyond financial loss. "Mrs. Williams, how has learning about the terrorist connection affected your daily life?" "I can't shop without wondering if I'm somehow contributing to violence," Margaret replied. "I can't trust banks, stores, or even my own credit cards. You didn't just steal money, you stole my ability to live without fear." The prosecution called Samuel Martinez, a military veteran whose credit card information had been used to fund a human trafficking operation that enslaved young women in Romania. His testimony revealed the particular cruelty of using a veteran's stolen information to fund crimes against the innocent people he had served to protect. "I spent 12 years in the Army protecting freedom and human rights," Samuel testified, his military bearing evident, even in civilian clothes. "Pierce used my stolen information to fund the enslavement of young women who were raped and tortured for profit." Defense attorney Donald Marsh, objected to the emotional testimony, arguing that Pierce couldn't have known the specific uses of stolen information. But federal judge Maria Rodriguez overruled the objection, noting that the international scope of consequences was directly relevant to Pierce's criminal liability. Mr. Pierce recruited and trained accomplices, specifically because he understood the global nature of the criminal network he was serving. Judge Rodriguez explained, "The victims have a right to describe the full impact of crimes that Pierce knew would fund international organized crime." Rosa Delgado, a single mother of 3 young children, testified about how Pierce's theft of her information had been used to create false identities for a drug smuggling operation that brought fentanyl into American communities. The irony was devastating. Pierce's racist assumptions about minority mothers had enabled crimes that specifically targeted minority communities. "He looked at me and saw a criminal because I'm Latina," Rosa testified, her voice growing stronger as she spoke. "But he was the criminal, and he used my stolen information to bring poison into neighborhoods like mine, destroying families that look like my family." The cumulative impact of victim testimony created an emotional weight that legal arguments alone could never achieve. Jurors saw how Pierce's individual racism had enabled a web of international violence that touched innocent lives across multiple continents. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, the FBI victim advocate, testified about the psychological trauma that victims experienced when learning about the international implications of their stolen information. "These aren't typical fraud victims who just lost money. They're people struggling with the moral complexity of unwitting complicity in international atrocities." The prosecution presented victim impact statements from families worldwide whose lives had been affected by crimes funded through Pierce's operation. A widow in London, whose husband had died in a terrorist attack, partially funded by Pierce's stolen data. Parents in Germany whose daughter had been trafficked using falsified documents created with Pierce's victims' information. The victims of Pierce's crimes include not just the American customers he targeted, but the innocent people worldwide who suffered from the international crimes his operation enabled. Harris explained to the jury, Pierce's own family members took the witness stand, not to defend him, but to express their horror at learning about his criminal activities. His sister Patricia Pierce Coleman testified about the shame and trauma of discovering that her brother had enabled international terrorism. "When I learned what Landon had done, I felt sick," Patricia testified. "Not just because he committed crimes, but because he used racism and hatred to help people who murder innocent children and enslave young women." The victim testimony phase concluded with Agent Zara Novak returning to the witness stand to describe the personal impact of Pierce's assault and the broader implications for law enforcement officers working undercover in dangerous situations. "Pierce's attack wasn't just physical violence against me personally," Zara testified. "It was an attack on the principle that federal agents can work undercover to protect communities from international organized crime. His racist assumptions nearly cost the FBI months of investigation that ultimately saved lives worldwide." Dr. Isabella Cruz took the witness stand as the prosecution's final expert witness. Her testimony designed to provide jurors with a comprehensive understanding of how Pierce's local criminal operation had connected to sophisticated international networks that threatened global security. Pierce's grocery store operation was a single node in a criminal network that spanned 15 countries and generated over $200 million annually. Dr. Cruz testified, using visual displays to show the international scope of the conspiracy Pierce had supported. Assistant U.S. Attorney Harris walked Dr. Cruz through the technical evidence that connected Pierce's racist targeting to international terrorism financing, money laundering, and human trafficking operations across 3 continents. Dr. Cruz, please explain to the jury how credit card information stolen from Pierce's store was processed and distributed to international criminal organizations. Dr. Cruz's testimony revealed the sophisticated technical infrastructure that had transformed Pierce's racist customer profiling into a tool for global organized crime. Pierce's operation used military-grade encryption to transmit stolen financial data to servers in Romania, where it was processed and packaged for sale on international dark web marketplaces. The expert testimony included detailed analysis of the criminal supply chain that connected Pierce's local grocery store to international atrocities. Stolen credit card information was converted into cryptocurrencies, laundered through legitimate businesses, and ultimately used to purchase weapons, forged documents, and other materials for criminal organizations worldwide. The Kozlov syndicate specifically recruited store managers like Pierce because they understood how American racial bias could be exploited to protect their operations. Dr. Cruz explained, Pierce's willingness to target minority customers was valuable because those victims faced systemic barriers to reporting crimes and being believed by authorities. Defense attorney Marsh attempted to challenge Cruz's testimony by arguing that Pierce couldn't have understood the sophisticated technical aspects of the international conspiracy, but her analysis demolished this defense by showing Pierce's extensive training and understanding of the criminal network. Pierce received detailed training in customer profiling, data harvesting, and international money laundering. Dr. Cruz testified, presenting evidence of Pierce's participation in online training sessions conducted by foreign criminal experts. His communications show sophisticated understanding of how local racism could be weaponized for international criminal profit. The expert testimony included analysis of Pierce's recruitment and training of other racist accomplices across 6 states, demonstrating his active role in expanding the criminal conspiracy rather than passive participation in others' crimes. Pierce wasn't just following orders. He was building a domestic network of racist assets who would enable foreign adversaries to exploit American communities. Dr. Cruz explained, his arrest prevented the expansion of criminal operations that could have funded international terrorism for years. Dr. Cruz's testimony revealed that Pierce's operation had been under international surveillance by intelligence agencies from 5 countries, all tracking the flow of stolen American financial data to criminal networks that threatened global security. British intelligence was monitoring Pierce's operation because stolen data from his store was being used to fund terrorist attacks in the UK. Dr. Cruz testified, German authorities were tracking his network because it was enabling human trafficking operations that destabilized European security. The prosecution used Dr. Cruz's expert analysis to demonstrate the broader implications of Pierce's crimes for national and international security, showing how individual racism could be exploited by foreign adversaries to threaten American interests and democratic allies worldwide. Pierce's racist targeting of American customers provided foreign criminals with the financial resources and operational security needed to attack democratic institutions and innocent civilians across multiple continents. Dr. Cruz concluded. The expert testimony phase concluded with Dr. Cruz explaining how the FBI's investigation of Pierce's operation had led to the disruption of criminal networks in 12 countries and the prevention of planned terrorist attacks that would have killed hundreds of innocent people. Pierce's assault on Agent Novak provided the legal justification for raids that dismantled a criminal conspiracy threatening global security. Dr. Cruz testified, his racist violence ultimately led to the protection of innocent lives worldwide. Defense attorney Marsh's cross-examination attempted to minimize Pierce's role in the international conspiracy, but Dr. Cruz's analysis showed that Pierce had been an active and essential participant whose racist targeting had been central to the criminal network's operational success. Without Pierce's willingness to target and intimidate minority customers, this criminal operation could not have functioned effectively. Dr. Cruz explained, his racism wasn't incidental to the conspiracy. It was the foundation that made everything else possible. The prosecution recalled Dr. Cruz for additional technical testimony about the broader implications of Pierce's crimes for cybersecurity and national security policy. Her analysis revealed that Pierce's operation had been used as a testing ground for criminal methods that were being replicated across democratic societies worldwide. The Kozlov syndicate used Pierce's operation to develop a replicable model for exploiting racial bias in democratic societies. Dr. Cruz testified, they identified American racism as a prototype for destabilizing social cohesion and exploiting ethnic tensions in other countries. Dr. Cruz presented evidence that criminal techniques perfected in Pierce's operation had been exported to criminal networks in France, where they were exploiting anti-immigrant sentiment, and to Australia, where they were targeting indigenous communities. The international implications extended beyond financial crime to threats against democratic institutions worldwide. Pierce's racist targeting methods were being taught to criminal organizations in 12 countries. Dr. Cruz explained, displaying a world map showing the global spread of techniques originated in Pierce's suburban grocery store. His operation became a training model for weaponizing ethnic bias for criminal profit. The expert testimony included analysis of communication intercepts between Pierce and international criminal instructors who had provided guidance on psychological manipulation, customer profiling, and operational security. The recordings revealed Pierce's enthusiasm for sharing his racist insights with foreign criminal experts. In this recording from March 15th, Pierce can be heard explaining to his handlers how to identify high-value minority targets who would be dismissed by American authorities. Dr. Cruz testified as the court listened to Pierce's voice, providing racist targeting advice to international criminals. The prosecution used Dr. Cruz's analysis to demonstrate that Pierce's operation had generated intelligence value for foreign adversaries, seeking to understand American social vulnerabilities that could be exploited for espionage, terrorism, and political destabilization. Foreign intelligence services were monitoring Pierce's operation, not just for criminal profit, but to study how American racial bias could be weaponized against American interests. Dr. Cruz revealed, Pierce was unknowingly providing counterintelligence information to hostile foreign governments. Dr. Cruz's testimony revealed that the technical infrastructure Pierce had helped maintain was being used by state-sponsored actors from Russia and China to conduct cyber warfare against American financial institutions and government agencies. The same servers that processed Pierce's stolen credit card data were being used to launch cyber attacks against American banks, defense contractors, and government agencies. Dr. Cruz explained, Pierce's operation was providing cover and funding for foreign intelligence activities that threatened American national security. The expert analysis included detailed examination of Pierce's role in training other racist accomplices who had been recruited to expand the criminal network across American communities. Pierce's training materials revealed sophisticated understanding of how to exploit American racial dynamics for criminal advantage. Pierce developed detailed psychological profiles of different racial and ethnic communities, identifying which groups would face skepticism when reporting financial crimes. Dr. Cruz testified, his training materials were being distributed to criminal recruiters seeking similar assets in other American communities. The prosecution presented evidence that Pierce had been in communication with over 40 potential recruits across 12 states, all store managers, security guards, and retail employees who shared his racist attitudes and could be trained to target minority customers. Pierce wasn't just participating in international organized crime. He was building a domestic infrastructure that would have enabled foreign criminals to exploit American communities on a massive scale. Dr. Cruz explained, the technical evidence revealed that Pierce's operation had been generating detailed demographic data about American communities that was being provided to foreign intelligence services for strategic planning purposes. Pierce's customer targeting data was being analyzed by foreign governments to identify American communities that could be exploited for espionage recruitment, political manipulation, and social destabilization. Dr. Cruz testified. Dr. Cruz's expert analysis demonstrated that Pierce's racist assault on Agent Novak had prevented the expansion of criminal operations that would have threatened American national security for years to come. If Pierce's operation had continued expanding as planned, foreign adversaries would have gained unprecedented access to American financial data and demographic intelligence that could have been used to conduct sophisticated attacks against American institutions and communities. Dr. Cruz explained, the prosecution used Dr. Cruz's testimony to present evidence of ongoing threats from international criminal networks seeking to recruit racist Americans who could provide operational security for criminal activities targeting minority communities. Pierce's operation demonstrated to foreign criminals that American racism could be exploited as a protective mechanism for international organized crime. Dr. Cruz testified, criminal organizations worldwide are now actively recruiting racist Americans as local assets. The expert testimony concluded with Dr. Cruz's analysis of policy recommendations for preventing similar criminal exploitation of American racial bias. Her recommendations included enhanced monitoring of businesses serving minority communities, improved hate crime reporting mechanisms, and international cooperation to disrupt criminal networks that exploit ethnic tensions. The Pierce investigation taught law enforcement that individual racism can become a national security threat when exploited by sophisticated international criminals. Dr. Cruz explained, protecting American communities requires understanding how domestic prejudice can be weaponized by foreign adversaries. Dr. Cruz's final testimony addressed the long-term implications of Pierce's crimes for American cybersecurity and international relations, emphasizing that his racist violence had exposed vulnerabilities that foreign adversaries would continue attempting to exploit. Pierce's assault on Agent Novak prevented a criminal conspiracy that threatened not just American financial security, but the stability of democratic institutions worldwide. Dr. Cruz concluded, his racism enabled international criminals to fund terrorism, human trafficking, and political destabilization that could have killed thousands of innocent people. The prosecution's expert testimony phase concluded with Dr. Cruz explaining how the investigation and prosecution of Pierce's crimes had led to enhanced international cooperation against criminal networks that exploit ethnic bias for operational advantage. The Pierce case has become a model for international law enforcement cooperation against criminals who weaponize racial bias. Dr. Cruz testified, his crimes were local, but the response has been global, creating new tools for protecting vulnerable communities worldwide. Defense attorney Marcia's final cross-examination attempted to portray Pierce as a victim of manipulation by sophisticated international criminals, but Dr. Cruz's analysis had definitively established Pierce as an active and enthusiastic participant whose racist attitudes had been central to the criminal conspiracy's success. The federal courthouse in Denver was packed with media, victims, and community members as the jury returned after 3 days of deliberation to deliver their verdict in United States v. Landon Pierce. Federal Judge Maria Rodriguez called the court to order as Pierce sat at the defendant's table, his face pale and drawn after months of federal custody and the devastating testimony that had exposed his role in international organized crime. Has the jury reached a verdict? Judge Rodriguez asked. Jury foreman David Thompson, a retired engineer, stood and faced the court. We have, Your Honor. The courtroom fell silent as Thompson prepared to read the verdict that would determine Pierce's fate and send a message about how the American justice system responds to racism weaponized for international crime. On the charge of assault on a federal officer, we find the defendant guilty. Agent Zara Novak, sitting in the front row with her arm finally healed from Pierce's violent attack, felt a surge of vindication as the first guilty verdict was announced. The racist assault that had launched this entire investigation was officially recognized as a federal crime. On the charge of conspiracy to commit wire fraud, we find the defendant guilty. Assistant U.S. Attorney Chloe Harris nodded with satisfaction as the financial crimes charges were affirmed. The jury had accepted the prosecution's argument that Pierce's racist targeting was central to the international money laundering conspiracy. On the charge of money laundering in support of international organized crime, we find the defendant guilty. Pierce's face crumpled as he realized the full extent of his criminal liability. The performance bonuses he had received for targeting minority customers had legally connected him to terrorism financing and human trafficking operations worldwide. On the charge of providing material support to international terrorism, we find the defendant guilty. The terrorism charge carried the heaviest potential sentence, and Pierce's defense attorney Donald Marsh visibly slumped as his client's fate was sealed. The jury had accepted the prosecution's evidence, that Pierce knew his operation was funding international violence. On the charge of civil rights violations through racially motivated targeting, we find the defendant guilty. The civil rights conviction acknowledged that Pierce's racism wasn't just personal prejudice, but criminal behavior that violated federal law, protecting minority communities from discriminatory targeting. On the charge of conspiracy to commit human trafficking, we find the defendant guilty. Pierce began quietly sobbing as the final charge was read. The credit card information he had stolen from innocent grocery store customers had been used to create false documents for enslaved women across Eastern Europe. Judge Rodriguez thanked the jury for their service before dismissing them and scheduling Pierce's sentencing hearing for the following month. The unanimous guilty verdicts on all 6 federal charges meant Pierce faced a potential sentence of life in federal prison. As Pierce was led away in handcuffs, victims and community members in the courtroom began applauding. The racist store manager who had brutally assaulted an FBI agent during her undercover investigation had been held accountable for enabling international atrocities through his criminal conspiracy. Justice has been served, Agent Kai Patel told reporters outside the courthouse. Pierce's racist violence led to his exposure as a participant in international organized crime that funded terrorism and human trafficking. His assault on Agent Novak ultimately saved lives worldwide. Freya Wilson, the customer whose video footage had provided crucial evidence of Pierce's assault, addressed the media with her teenage daughter beside her. "We filmed this attack because we knew it was wrong. We never imagined it would help expose international terrorism. But we're proud that our courage contributed to justice." 6 weeks later, Pierce returned to the federal courthouse for sentencing. Judge Rodriguez had reviewed hundreds of victim impact statements, expert analyses of his crime's international implications, and federal sentencing guidelines for terrorism-related offenses. "Mr. Pierce," Judge Rodriguez addressed the defendant, "your crimes began with racist assumptions about your customers and culminated in your violent assault on an FBI agent investigating international organized crime. Your racist targeting enabled terrorism, human trafficking, and money laundering that threatened innocent lives across multiple continents." Pierce's family members, who had disowned him after learning about his criminal activities, were not present for sentencing. He sat alone at the defendant's table, facing the consequences of choices that had connected his local racism to global atrocities. "The court sentences you to 25 years in federal prison without possibility of parole, followed by 10 years of supervised release with monitoring for international criminal contacts." The sentence was severe, but appropriate for crimes that had enabled international terrorism and human trafficking. Pierce would spend the rest of his productive life in federal custody, prevented from ever again enabling foreign adversaries to exploit American communities. Additionally, Judge Rodriguez continued, "You are ordered to pay $5.2 million in restitution to victims whose financial information you stole and whose lives were destroyed by the international crimes your operation enabled." Pierce's financial penalties would continue even after his release from prison, ensuring that he could never profit from his criminal activities or rebuild the wealth he had accumulated through racist targeting and international conspiracy. 1 year after Pierce's sentencing, Riverside Grocery reopened under new management with enhanced security measures, community oversight, and a commitment to serving all customers with dignity and respect. The store that had been a front for international organized crime was transformed into a symbol of community resilience and multiracial cooperation. Agent Zara Novak stood before the FBI Academy in Quantico, Virginia, addressing a classroom of new agents about the Pierce investigation and its lessons for modern law enforcement. Her commendation for exceptional service in the undercover operation had led to her promotion and assignment to train the next generation of federal agents. The Pierce case taught us that individual racism can be weaponized by sophisticated international criminals to threaten global security. Zara explained to the attentive students, "Our job as federal agents is to protect all American communities, understanding that attacks on minority citizens can be part of larger conspiracies against American interests." Her lecture included video footage of Pierce's assault demonstrating how his racist violence had exposed the criminal network he had been serving. The brutal attack that had left her injured had ultimately led to the disruption of international terrorism and human trafficking operations. Pierce believed his racism made him a patriot, protecting American society from criminals, Zara continued. In reality, his racism made him a traitor, enabling foreign adversaries to exploit American communities and fund attacks against democratic allies worldwide. The Pierce case had become a standard teaching tool at the FBI Academy, illustrating how domestic prejudice could be exploited by international criminals and how undercover operations could expose complex conspiracies that threatened national security. Agent Kai Patel had been promoted to supervise the FBI's new International Criminal Exploitation Unit, created specifically to investigate how foreign adversaries exploit American social tensions for criminal advantage. The unit's first major success had been dismantling a Russian network that was recruiting racist police officers to provide operational security for money laundering operations. Pierce wasn't an isolated case, Agent Kai explained to congressional investigators, examining foreign exploitation of American racial bias. International criminals are actively recruiting Americans whose racist attitudes can be used to target minority communities and protect criminal operations. Dr. Isabella Cruz had testified before the United Nations Security Council about the Pierce investigation, leading to enhanced international cooperation against criminal networks that exploit ethnic tensions for operational advantage. Her analysis had helped develop new tools for protecting vulnerable communities worldwide. The Pierce case demonstrated that local racism can become a global security threat when exploited by sophisticated international criminals. Dr. Cruz told UN delegates, "Protecting democratic societies requires understanding how domestic prejudice can be weaponized by foreign adversaries." Assistant U.S. Attorney Chloe Harris had been appointed to head a new federal task force on international criminal exploitation, coordinating with international partners to prosecute criminals who exploit racial bias for operational advantage. The Pierce prosecution had established legal precedents for holding racists accountable when their prejudice enables international crime. Pierce's conviction sent a clear message that Americans who enable foreign adversaries through racist targeting will face severe federal prosecution. Harris announced at the task force's inaugural meeting, the community affected by Pierce's crimes had transformed their trauma into activism and advocacy. The Pierce Accountability Project had become a national model for communities recovering from complex criminal victimization, while the Riverside Community Justice Initiative provided support for other neighborhoods facing similar exploitation. Freya Wilson had become a national speaker about the importance of citizen documentation of police misconduct and racist violence. Her video footage of Pierce's assault had been viewed over 50 million times, inspiring other bystanders to record injustice and support law enforcement investigations. Recording Pierce's attack felt like the right thing to do in the moment. Freya told audiences across the country, "We never imagined it would help expose international terrorism. But it taught us that ordinary citizens can make extraordinary contributions to justice." The grocery store's new management had implemented comprehensive anti-discrimination policies, regular community feedback sessions, and partnerships with local organizations to ensure that all customers felt safe and respected. The business that Pierce had corrupted through racist targeting became a model for inclusive customer service. As Zara concluded her presentation to the FBI Academy, she reflected on the personal and professional impact of the Pierce investigation. The racist assault that had endangered her undercover operation had ultimately led to one of the most significant international criminal prosecutions in recent history. Pierce's crimes teach us that protecting American communities requires understanding global threats. Zara told the new agents, "Racism isn't just a social problem. It's a national security vulnerability that foreign adversaries will exploit unless we remain vigilant." The investigation that began with a racist assault in a suburban grocery store had exposed an international criminal conspiracy, prevented terrorist attacks, disrupted human trafficking operations, and saved innocent lives across multiple continents. The ripple effects of Pierce's prosecution continued expanding across the law enforcement community and international security agencies. Detective Liam Ortiz, the local police liaison who had coordinated with federal agents during the investigation, had been promoted to head a new regional task force focused on identifying racist employees in critical infrastructure positions who could be exploited by foreign adversaries. The Pierce case taught us that racism in law enforcement isn't just a civil rights issue. It's a national security vulnerability. Detective Ortiz explained to police chiefs from across the state, "We have a responsibility to identify and remove officers whose prejudices could be weaponized by international criminals." The Pierce Accountability Project had established scholarship funds for students studying cybersecurity and international relations, ensuring that future professionals would understand how domestic prejudice could be exploited by foreign adversaries. The educational initiatives reached over 10,000 students annually, creating a new generation of security professionals aware of these threats. Margaret Williams, the 82-year-old retired teacher whose credit card had been used to purchase bomb materials for Afghan terrorists, had become a powerful advocate for elderly victims of cybercrime. Despite her age, she traveled to Washington, D.C. to testify before Congress about the need for enhanced protections for vulnerable populations. "Pierce targeted me because he assumed an old black woman wouldn't be taken seriously by authorities," Margaret told congressional representatives. "We need laws that recognize how criminals exploit both ageism and racism to victimize people like me." The international cooperation generated by the Pierce investigation had led to the creation of permanent joint task forces between American agencies and their counterparts in Britain, Germany, and other democratic allies. These partnerships had already prevented 6 additional terrorist plots and dismantled 12 human trafficking networks that were attempting to replicate Pierce's operational model. Agent Zara Martinez, who had coordinated international law enforcement during the investigation, now headed the FBI's Global Criminal Exploitation Division. Her unit monitored emerging threats from criminal organizations seeking to exploit ethnic tensions in democratic societies worldwide. Criminal networks are constantly evolving their methods for exploiting social divisions, Agent Martinez explained to international partners. The Pierce investigation gave us tools and strategies for disrupting these operations before they can threaten innocent lives. The grocery store chain that had employed Pierce faced ongoing federal oversight and had implemented company-wide reforms to prevent similar criminal infiltration. Their new policies included mandatory anti-bias training, enhanced cybersecurity measures, and direct reporting channels for discrimination complaints that bypassed local management. Corporate executives who had ignored complaints about Pierce's racist behavior faced personal liability in civil lawsuits filed by victims whose information had been used to fund international atrocities. Several executives had been forced to pay millions in personal damages, sending a clear message about corporate responsibility for employee conduct. The Pierce case had also influenced federal sentencing guidelines for hate crimes that enabled international criminal activities. Judges now had clearer authority to impose enhanced penalties when racist targeting facilitated foreign adversaries' operations against American interests. 3 years after Pierce's conviction, Agent Zara Novak received the FBI Director's Award for Exceptional Service, recognizing her courage during the Undercover operation and her continuing work to protect communities from international criminal exploitation. Agent Novak's investigation didn't just expose one criminal, it revealed a new category of threats that democratic societies must understand and address. FBI Director Michael Thompson announced during the award ceremony, "Stories like Pierce's deserve to be remembered, analyzed, and learned from." If this investigation inspired you to support justice and accountability, subscribe to Chains Broken and help us ensure these important stories continue reaching people who need to hear them. Together, we can break the chains of prejudice and protect communities from those who would exploit hatred for criminal gain. Your support helps us honor the courage of agents like Zara Novak and ensure that truth prevails over racism and international crime.